More than 40% of all agentic AI projects are expected to fail by 2027. The reasons are pretty fundamental and consistent with what they have been for the last couple of years. In my position as a data engineer and architect, we've discovered on this channel and talked about very lightly where the differences lie between a proof of concept and success. And today we'll be beginning that conversation around Gartner via CIO.com and the conversation around agentic AI projects that are expected to not just pause, not pivot, but to completely be canceled by 2027. This is not about model failure. This is about organizational failures. And this is the exact thesis of my upcoming book. If you have not already joined me on TikTok, if you have not already subscribed to this channel and liked this particular video, please go ahead and do that. I appreciate you helping me grow the particular brand and gain as many different followers as possible. Trying to expand the knowledge of data, artificial intelligence, so that we can all have a safer, more transparent world, but also bring knowledge so that we can grow as these tools really provide us the ability to do so. So if you haven't already checked this article out on CIO, please go ahead and do so. The link will be in my bio here. But really, what has happened between some of the information that we'll talk about today is Anushri Verma. Please forgive me if I'm destroying your name. From Gartner, talks about how early hype driven proof of concepts have been largely misapplied, blind to scale of the costs and the complexity of the situations. I know a lot of influencers who do have positive outlooks on how quickly these things can be adopted. In my opinion, and on my channel, we try to focus on the feasibility of technology while it is still transformative. My position specifically as a solutions architect in my career has provided me the autonomy to be the person that businesses and managers go to truly solve problems for the business. And so one of the biggest problems is always paying for new technology and the transformation or the change management in general. While these things usually are seen as cheap or free, they truly are not, right? So, um, Anushri Verma, again from Gartner, gave a great background on where these complexities are starting out. Really, it's just being misapplied because a lot of the proof of concepts, in my opinion, come from shops where people have maybe little experience, especially from the vibe coding perspective. These things don't start out from senior engineering's hands, which has its good and its bad sides, right? So if you're looking from outside the situation, you usually bring points of view that provide a great start to the future. If you are somebody who's been in the industry, if you have knowledge, you usually understand the pitfalls. You usually start to be able to rely on experience that can help shape the future of success, meaning you don't struggle so much to find out how to be successful. Um, and so, great summarization from Verma here about where proof of concepts need to aim to be more successful in trying to capture the larger picture for their entire projects, which is just, is it truly aligning with the problem that a business has or that a market has? And do you have the analytics behind it to be able to prove where it becomes effective, truly going to be necessary? Because the costs associated with the investments that happen need to be measurable. If they're not measurable, they're almost unappealing in every way, right? So businesses don't want to invest in things that don't actually have a return of investment long term. Jeremy Ung, who also is in this article, specifically the Blackline CTO, talks about how pilots shine in clean isolation, development, really, right? But production itself inherently brings variable costs, variable documentation, exceptions, inconsistent user profiles, as well as the concept that throwing any new work into it really scales for failure in general. So having production level work is always a little bit messy, and to be successful, to really capture the money that is being spent for your company or maybe just your personal project, if you're trying to capitalize on the work that you've already placed in this and you want to scale it up so it becomes a part of your success story, or you start capturing more money and more market share, um, you have to deal with technical debt. You have to deal with data complexities. You have to deal with migrating and integrating data. If you yourself or a company it's difficult for you to do this, your artificial intelligence strategy is going to struggle as well. So how do you make that leap and give the proper setup? um, this inside the article covers some of those steps, and in future videos we'll also talk about it. But it is noted, right, that scaling really needs to become a bigger part of that conversation for entrepreneurs and dreamers for products and services that are trying to be brought to the market. Um, it's great to have a field of new inventions, or new products and services, but if many of them won't be successful, I don't know if we're having productive conversations. Also, Ahmed Zaidi, um, somebody else in the article, the Accelerate, if I'm saying that company name wrong, please I apologize. He is the CEO. Um, Talked about how risk mitigations kill projected return on investment, and national cancellations, or I'm sorry, rational cancellations across the board will start to take effect, where companies do have quarterly and yearly earnings that they're going to want to address. And if they can't do that from a rational perspective, they will start to wind these projects down and focus in areas that have been neglected for the previous years, where they can see a clearer return on investment for money over the time. So, in these articles, it talks about how the cost of the models definitely can be a disruptive factor for adoption. The models are being driven down in cost over time. You see that with the releases, but there is a variable cost to using more complex models. And depending on how often your team hits a retail level of that API, where I've had discussions previously of how workflows are set up with customers and clients, that if you're hitting the retail API, obviously there's a price associated. The next time you hit that API, you really should start from an organizational question of, are we caching or are we asking at that retail price again? Because those will stack up, right? For 20,000, 50,000 users, at 4 hours usage rate a day, you're talking hundreds of thousands of operating dollars per month. That can change budgets for even big companies, right? So the future, here, is that, or at least how I believe it from the article, is that autonomy and kind of the future of where we want this to go from an agentic artificial intelligence perspective is that artificial intelligence, agentic AI, does amplify itself from a geometric sort of perspective, right? So there's that linear progression of like maybe the chat conversations in traditional AI and then with agentic AI, you're able to scale up across a workflow. And Gartner also recognized that, I think, from what they've included here in their details, right? Where they talked about how 96% of organizations launch without sufficient data. Gartner's data here says that 60% of projects have an abandonment rate over a short period. This is going to be layer one of my book that talks about how there should be a refinery for your company that underpins data, builds the data from the raw data into actionable insights, and then also provides a minimal friction layer to actionable, uh, usable insights for your reporting layer, for your business facing partners, and the people who are not on the back end who don't understand the data pipelines but are experts in the data, right? So marketing experts, banking experts, whoever else is at your company with you. So the real question here becomes, how expensive does bad data become when agents act on this autonomously? For sure. And an example of that could be wrong vendor scheduling, misrouted claims, false compliance triggers. And this is all expressible by there being a governance gap, right? So Gardner talks here about what actually does survive, from meshing what I have been talking about on the channel, but also what Gartner is pulling out here, is that organizational designs have a problem with structural fixes in place, right? So we do need to talk about how your data operations runs, who manages it, who's in charge of the initiatives of your company, and where the governance gaps lie for liability versus maybe frontline expectations at your organization. So all of these things start to become hindrances, right? So what should data leaders be doing right now? Well, from my perspective, again, you should be working on your 3 actions, and this comes out in the book that I'll be putting out here, maybe early spring or early summer. Um, you want to work on killing unassigned pilots, right? Or unsupported pilots, things that don't tie out to initiatives at the company. You want to talk about what it means to build a refinery audit for your data. And I would give it a timetable, right? Like a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day refinery audit. And then lastly, weaponize these stats in your meetings to frame as leverage to shift investments from pilots to actual foundations. This can be applicable to AI research tanks or companies who are trying to make sales to grow the foundational models as well. Um, the hindrance, again, is, or the bottom line at this point, the hindrance and the bottom line is that the AI hype isn't over, okay? But the reckoning has started. Survivors who build refineries first will outlast everyone else. So raw data is virtually unusable. And if you feed raw data into your artificial intelligence structures, models, systems, you're going to reap very few benefits at a very expensive rate. I have a book dropping that's coming out again, working on a couple titles here, but it's around the central theme of data is the new oil. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do that. I'm not on LinkedIn right now. I'm going to be working on my other platforms for a while, but TikTok, YouTube, and Substack. Check out my Substack. Just put out a new article about data governance coming out today. And then yesterday, I think we did one about general agentic projects also failing as well. So go to Substack, link in my bio, check that out, and comment what has been the biggest agentic blocker for your orgs or your team so far. Not talking like research think tank situation. This is real business. I want to know, right? Because this is where rubber meets the road. But I appreciate you guys again. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and I'll see you next time.